The OBG brought to you by
H.C. Henderson Esquire.
Right, okay, so tonight I'm going to go a little bit hard. This is about a massive robbery by powerful corporations of our data, our creativity, and our very intellectual property. And we need to call it what it is, the Great Training Robbery of our time. See what I did there? So in order for large language models to work, they train on our data in a very simple way. They scrape huge amounts of text from the internet, websites, forums, books, articles, from social media, anything that's publicly accessible, and sometimes material that wasn't meant to be public. Naughty, naughty. And they break that text into tiny pieces called tokens, which are usually fragments of words. Then the model learns patterns, how words follow each other, how sentences are structured, and how ideas connect. It doesn't actually remember whole documents. It learns statistical relationships from them. And these patterns, they become the model's weights, millions or billions of numbers that shape how it generates the new text. So to recap, LLMs read enormous amounts of human writing, they analyze patterns in it, and then they use those patterns to generate new responses. Simple. And the heist is this. Corporations have stolen our data, entire libraries of human thought scraped from the web, our blogs, our art, our writing, our conversations. They then use it to train large language models, and it isn't safe harvesting because it isn't open data. It's extraction. It's human resource extraction. They took it with no meaningful consent. They used it without asking. They built billion-dollar AI systems, and are making people rich by vacuuming up our material. And it's material that belongs to creators, to people who never agreed to be the raw material of private profit. And this isn't just moral theft, it's legal theft, or at least in many places it goes unchecked. However, there have been some legal battles that have set some precedents. In one major case, for example, Sarah Anderson, Kelly McKernan, and Carla Ortiz, they sued Stability AI and Midjourney, claiming that their images were scraped and used without their permission to train AI art models. And that's not a simple misunderstanding or error on the company's behalf. That's a foul, and it's a massive appropriation. And talking about appropriation, I'm wondering if these are the same people that claim appropriation doesn't exist when I bring up cultural appropriation, or does it only apply to the mostly middle and upper class that are screaming the loudest that the fruits of their leisurely pursuits are being taken? Who knows? Anyway, Getty Images, they also sued Stability AI in the English High Court, alleging criminal infringement over millions of images used in training. And there's another famous case involving the Authors Guild, who battled against AI, where 17 writers accused OpenAI of using their books to train models without permission. And that fight isn't theoretical, but it's a real courtroom drama. And finally, HiQ Labs versus LinkedIn, the US branch, they contested, or there was some contestation where HiQ scraped LinkedIn profiles, which were publicly accessible, to use for data analytics. And LinkedIn said no. However, the court said yes for now. And this case is a direct ancestor of today's data scraping battles. Companies appear to be arguing that they can't prop the economy up without theft. And of course, the courts agree. Now, creatives watch AI mimic their voices, their styles, their decades of labor without pay, without permission, while citizens discover that their personal data was quietly shoveled into machine learning data sets. And who owns knowledge? Who owns language? Who owns the stories we tell, the images we create, the jokes that we share, and the patterns of our thinking? And the algorithms pick those up and they eat them and they treat them as raw ore. The Romans actually had a word, and it was res communis, and that means the things that belong to anyone and no one, or the things that belong to everyone and no one. But we've entered an era where corporations insist that what belongs to everyone belongs to them. And they promise the world, but guard their models like fortresses. And they feed on the commons and then privatize the harvest. And this is the worst heist in the whole of human history, that we know of anyway. And this isn't like the Great Train Robbery, when cash was loaded into a train and carried off in sacks. That was huge, but it was finite. You could, in theory, catch the robbers and find the money and return it. But here, the goods are intangible. Words, creativity, patterns of speech, thoughts. Once they're scraped, once they're converted into model weights, they belong to the corporations, their profit and their leverage. And it's closer to the myth of Prometheus, who gave fire to humanity. But this fire isn't free to all. It's owned, licensed, and monetized. Or much like the Trojan horse story that you probably know of, we built the internet, we filled it with our content, and now the tech giants have built a giant horse that's coming amongst us, and they come out and steal everything. Now, there is some controversy surrounding all of this, and it does have some pros and cons. For instance, supporters of this mass data gathering theft, they argue necessity. LLMs need vast amounts of data, and without our content, they can't function. Just like I can't function without food, but it's somehow not okay for me to steal food from the supermarket. Then they claim there's benefit. These models can accelerate medicine, education, creativity, just like supermarket food can sustain me, but still I can't take it. And then there's a fair use argument. Some companies or corporations, they lean on fair use protections, claiming that their training transform the data in ways that justify their actions, like a supermarket pack of gluten-free sausages does for me. Now, there's people like Sam Altman from OpenAI and other leading AI executives, and they make the case that we're building tools that are going to help humanity. And they claim that they need the data, and they need the data to train the things that they're going to share publicly or privately. And that's terrible. On the other side, creators, writers, artists, musicians, they see this as exploitation. Cory Doctorow, he calls it enclosure of the digital commons, big tech rent-seeking of the cultural output of people who never agreed to be mined. And Shoshana Zuboff, she's the author of The Age of Surveillance Capitalism, she warns that we're being commodified, that the very stuff of human creativity is now raw material for profit without compensation or control. And then there are the legal lines. In 2025, a federal judge ruled on Anthropic's use of copyrighted books. More than 7 million were allegedly pirated, and the judge called this use of this theft exceedingly transformative, a ruling that unsettles creators who see no real payment for decades of intellectual labour. And I know I'd get a fine for liberating a single book from a bookshop for transformative purposes. And there's also a growing argument that the AI boom is a bubble. And my favourite tech critic, Citron, he has been blunt. He warns that we're building an AI empire on hype, not value, and I agree. And he cites unsustainable investment, energy costs, and murky monetization as signs that much of this will collapse under its own weight. And those critics aren't alone. Courts and creators are pushing back. Legal risk Israel, copyright risk Israel. If the AI companies keep draining our creative commons without compensation, they may build something powerful, there's no doubt, but morally hollow, as if they care anyway. So where's this leading to? If we don't change course, we're heading into a future where corporations own not just our data, but our creative legacies. Jobs as creators become obsolete or unpaid. The public's role in shaping technology shrinks while the power of a few corporations grow unchecked. What's new? And even with all these shenanigans, there's a way out, or at least a way forward. And that's to enforce copyright, something I detest in its current incarnation. However, governments should strengthen copyright laws as they are and ensure that they apply to AI training. Require transparent licensing, because if companies want to train LLMs on their data, they should pay license fees to creators. They should also support fair AI models. Publicly funded or open source models should be built using properly licensed data sets, and they should create collective rights for creators, where digital unions, collective bargaining comes into play, and artists deserve a cut where their work power billion-dollar AI systems. And finally, they should regulate broadly and introduce laws that treat personal expression as a right, not a free-for-all. Now, this is broadly a Western attitude, so I'm not too keen on this, but it should serve where it's placed. So this isn't just intellectual property being taken. This is us, the people who spoke, who wrote, who hoped and dreamed. Our stories, our memories, our creative spark turned into fuel for corporate profit. And we didn't give them permission. And if we do nothing, we're quietly going to lose control over the most intimate parts of ourselves. We either reclaim our data, our creativity, or we continue to be mined, commodified, and erased. And this isn't just a tech issue, it's a moral one, it's a political one, and ultimately it's a human one. And this is also why it's important to stand up for those who are not us, because the cry here is coming from artists and writers, and those who aren't artists or writers are continuing to look the other way. We all need to stand up and speak out and demand our work back. I am the OBJ.
Kush now, think Kush live.